All right, hello and welcome anybody who's out there watching the first annual Pride of Gryffindor Awards live stream, aka the POGS Awards. I am here, I'm Kevin, aka TidalDragon. I'm here with Caitlin, aka TreacleTart. And we, the Gryffindor staffers at hpfanfictalk.com, are here to broadcast the awards and announce winners with some discussion and some surprise visits from a couple of our nominated authors and members as well. Caitlin, if you want to talk a little bit about who we are and what the POGs are, that would be super.
Basically, we're a fan fiction site. We started from a lot of authors who have a love for Harry Potter, and we've expanded into original fiction and non-Harry Potter stuff as well. Our Pride of Gryffindor Awards are mainly to recognize the people within the Gryffindor house who have been outstanding over the past year or so. From their artwork all the way through their writing, different genres, different areas, different types of stories all across the board. So I'm really looking forward to getting a chance to talk about some of these really great works.
Super, and we're very excited to have people with us. We decided to broadcast it this year because we thought it'd be kind of a change of pace. .com, aka HPFT, is primarily a website with an archive where authors like Caitlin talked about, fanfic authors from right now, but also many other fandom and can post their stories online. But we also have a forum component, and these awards have typically worked, we do a lot behind the scenes to make them happen, and then it sort of just becomes a post announcing the winner, which is great. But we wanted to add sort of a new dimension to this with a new start, with a new site. And we were lucky enough to have the brilliant and clever Not Theodore, aka Sharn, who came up with the Pride of Gryffindor to use for the awards this year, which is our inaugural year, and going forward. And so now, I mentioned that we were going to have some visits from our nominees at least, and we are going to have a visit now from one of the folks who's retained the most mystery on HPFT about their true identity. From satellite transmission, we'll say, audio only, the illustrious Pixel E. Anin, aka Pix.
Hi.
Hi, Pix. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. This is actually kind of awesome. And I like being mysterious, so this is great.
Thanks for joining us.
Well, you're mysterious, write mysterious stories, which are obviously spectacular and nominated in these awards. So we're thrilled to have you with us to make a broadcast more than just a little bit of a rundown of what has gone on behind the scenes. So we really appreciate you joining us.
Well, thanks for having me again. This is cool.
So your big nominated work this year is Rabbit Heart, which is a spectacular novel that you wrote. When did you finally finish it?
Oh, I think it was at the end of 2015. Or
that's about when I thought, but I prefer to ask rather than state myself out and be wrong. And it's a very interesting, unique story. Kind of tell us what was the idea behind Rabbit Heart and how it took hold in your mind.
Oh, okay. Well, Rabbit Heart started as a challenge to myself. All my stories start as a challenge to myself. I generally begin by asking myself, what do I think that I can't write? And I hadn't yet done a teen romance. I love reading teen romance. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. However, I didn't think I could write one. And so I wanted a twist because, as writers, we're always trying to do what hasn't been done yet. So I thought, well, what would be this really cool twist that I could do with teens at Hogwarts? And I said, I know, blood, because, you know, blood is one of those elements that really adds depth and darkness to things. And I said, okay, so something that sucks blood. And I thought about doing a vampire trope, but then I decided, no, what sucks blood but would be really, really surprising? And so I went through a whole bunch of different ideas, and I thought, well, cute, cuddly rabbits would be the farthest thing from anybody's mind that would suck blood. So that's how that came together. So it was really putting together something that's almost a crack fic kind of idea and then making it into something that was real.
So, Ren is the main character of that story, and one thing that is always really hard to accomplish in fiction is to create a believable, deep character. How did you go about creating Ren? Was there any specific tricks that you used to develop her?
I wish that I had tricks. Tricks would be so awesome. Ren was very difficult to conceive. I went through the entire first draft of that novel with a different main character. I can't even remember what her name was, but towards the end of the first draft, she was not working. And so I just barreled through it, and I wrote the most horrible first draft I think I have ever written ever. Of course, you know, I say that about all of my first drafts because I'm a chronic rewriter. I just barreled through it, and I knew she wasn't working. And then I tried to revise with her, and she wasn't working. So I fired my main character. And then I just had to take 5 steps back and think about what I wanted my main character to accomplish in the story. And I talked to a lot of people. I think I had a lot of character therapy sessions until, and then I interviewed a bunch of characters that popped up in my mind, and Ren turned out to be the one that stuck with it all the way through. And she and I have a really great relationship now. I'm really happy that I met her because she made the story what it is. And I think that if I had just gone with my first draft, I wouldn't be talking about my story here.
Well, can you give us any insight? Because this is like a bombshell to me anyway. That Ren was not the end all be all from the word go. Can you give us any insight as to felt didn't work? And God, you know, I know we look back and say nothing worked with the original character, but if you could you give us some insight about what you feel like didn't work with the original conception, and then how you tried to change that with Ren?
Oh, yes. That I can talk about all day long, but I'll try and make it really, really short. My first character, I wanted a main character who was distant from her emotions. And so I started with this really stiff, like cardboard cutout kind of characterization where she was ignoring everything emotional. And she turned into kind of a snob, which of course didn't work at all. And so I really had to think long and hard about how can somebody be emotionally distant, but maybe not want to be emotionally distant. And so Ren was born out of more circumstance than something that was intrinsically her. I had to give her a great grandmother that was having issues. I had to give her overwhelming responsibilities that that kept her more focused on, you know, just barreling through her day-to-day stuff where she didn't have a lot of time to think about how she felt about things. And then the camera really helped because that put more distance between herself and the lives of the people around her. And so all of those things, which I considered circumstantial things, gave me the elements for her character that I really needed to tell the story. So the story, you know, the blood-sucking rabbits were great. I love them, but ultimately the story became about how Ren needed to reassert herself in her own life and live her life instead of just watching from the sidelines. So yeah, that was Ren.
So when you started writing Ren, what and this whole story in general, what drew you into the post-war / next generation? Any particular thought process to that? Did you just kind of wing it and it developed into a next gen story as you went, or did you have this planned for a different generation and it just ended up where it was?
I had next gen picked out immediately, and I needed that because I needed the flexibility with the characters.
Cool.
You know, so if I had picked any other time period prior to that, I would have had all of the other, plot from Harry Potter that I had to deal with. So I really wanted the flexibility of where I wanted this to go. And I still have in the back of my mind that I would love to write part of the story from the vampires' point of view and really explore the relationship that the vampires have with the wizards in the Harry Potter universe, because that is highly intriguing to me. This was not that story, so so I might have something else that might be cooking later.
Heard it here first story.
I'm sorry, you were breaking up a little bit.
Oh, I said you heard it here first, Gryffindors. There might be another story coming soon. Hopefully we can get Pix to write it.
Yeah, I have to say, and I've said it, I think, I don't know how many times I've said it in reviews, I'd hate the little vampires. So it would be very interesting to me too, I think, as even as someone who just loathes them, which I think is a talent of yours in writing the story, to see their sort of side of things, I guess.
Yeah, it's just very intriguing, and I loved your reviews, Kevin, because up until I think through the first third of the story, you weren't quite sure that there were actually vampires in my story, which I found to be very funny. And it was intentional on my part, so I'm glad that worked.
Well, I've never been accused of being the most perceptive person either, but I will call it your skill. One of the interesting things that you had said about Rin was kind of putting her behind the camera as being helpful to creating some distance, and I couldn't help but think about something that we've had to go on at HPFT, which is the Throw Down the Gauntlet challenge related to Valentine's Day, and how a camera was one of the devices that could be utilized in there. What did you? I know you participated, so what did you think about that when you saw the idea of using a camera?
My first gut reaction was, I'm sorry, I've already done that. Let me pick something else. And I don't believe we have a camera in our fic.
Its absent. Its absence is notable. I will say.
What prompt did you end up going with, just for those curious people out there?
We went with traditions for the second one. And the first one was, what was it? I can't even remember. I can tell you the story, but what were the two? What were the two prompts again? Not the one about loss. We didn't do the loss.
Okay. And then did you hide some random items in there anywhere? If so, do you mind sharing?
I try not to make my items random. So we did have chocolate. We tried to make the note work, but we ran out of words. I can't remember what the other items were. I know we used more than one in both
What
of them.
was there, Kevin? Keys. There's keys and
I remember the chocolate. I believe I'm remembering the right story. I went through and reread them all today to do the judging. But if I'm remembering correctly, I think they used the chocolate was like a giant broomstick of chocolate, right? From the
Yes,
from the Chudley cannons. Is that right, Pix?
yes, that's right. It was a signed broomstick from the Chudley cannons made out of chocolate. Was a prize for a competition.
And it was going to be a precious gift / maybe bribe to Charlie Weasley in
That's right.
Romania, I think.
That yes, that's right. And I know in the second one we did use keys, but I can't remember if we stuck anything else in there.
well, if you come across any real life chocolate broomsticks, you can feel free to send them my way.
Okay, I will remember that. That was a really fun challenge to do. Victoria, Ann, and I had a lot of fun putting together that story, and we're very happy with what we did. So thank you for hosting that challenge. That was awesome.
Well, that all goes out to Holly. She was the definite brainchild behind the all the prompts and everything with the gauntlet. So she deserves all your respect for that. I may have been involved in other things, but I do not have my fingerprints at all on the throw down the gauntlet.
Yeah, same here. I'm not even judging it. I'm actually writing for it. I'm really excited at the last minute I got to put in an entry. So I've been removed from judging and handling it at all.
Yeah, I can't wait to read all of the second entries to see how the stories come together.
Well, you'll have to keep your eyes peeled because Caitlin and I, obviously, we just blew the deadline because we can't really compete as staffers, even though Caitlin got to sort of jump in at the last minute, like she said. But we're making our best effort to come up with one that we did for fun, for the same prompts as well. Which
I can't wait.
I've been horribly negligent in writing the second part. I plan to do so that I could give Caitlin a pleasant surprise tonight with it being done. But unfortunately, I think I got the second coming of the plague I had over the last week or so. So I spent most of the afternoon just sleeping upright on my couch.
That's okay. I mean, I was only like half a week late with my half of it too. So
details. But we definitely want to thank you for stopping by and talking to us for so long in so much detail about your stories picks. We really appreciate it once again, and definitely feel free to stick around for the event if you can. For now, we are going to cut over to someone who's also just joined us, Kayla, aka Pop Punk Padfoot, also known to Susie about Harry Jenny. But she's been kind enough to join us to talk about some of her nominated works too. So thank you for being here, Kayla.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
hi, Kayla.
Hi. How's it going?
Not too bad.
It is going better than I think either of us imagined it going so far.
Definitely.
I'm here at my aunt's house with my mom and my sister, and I had to we just finished dinner, and I had to be like, okay, I'm stealing your office now. Like, I'll see you later. So.
Well, we definitely appreciate you stealing the office and taking the time to talk to us, because you have some very cool, very deep stories nominated and some really deep, complex characters that definitely resonated with a lot of people throughout multiple categories of voting as well. And those are, of course, Breathe and Edges, which focus on Breathe primarily on Sirius Black, and then Edges on Remus Lupin. But kind of both of them obviously about the dynamic between those two as well.
Mhm.
So which story do you want to start by kind of regaling us with the story of how it came to be?
I don't know. I mean, they both are not. I don't think either of them is really a super interesting story. I remember like Breathe, I wrote for. I cannot remember her username at the moment, but Jess's Diversity Challenge back when the HPFF forums were still around, and it was literally just like, okay, this is how I already imagine Sirius Black to be, so I'm just gonna like write a story about it. I don't think it was like a light bulb moment or anything. It was just kind of like, oh, like it makes sense. And then Edges is based on a Halsey song. Like I listen to a lot of music, and a lot of the times I'll be listening to a song and it'll like make me think of a story. So it was just kind of one of those situations, I guess. I just thought it'd be really cool to try and like bring in some mythology, I guess, to incorporate that, like, because it's based on Young God by Halsey, and I thought like trying to actually say Young God anywhere in the story and instead just like talk about mythology would be really fun. So yeah.
So those of us who've read your writing know that you have a great love of writing Sirius and the Marauders. How did that start? Is there any reason in particular that you really love him, or why did you get into that era?
You know what? It's kind of personal, but I just like find him like really interesting and really relatable, I guess. So like I don't know. I mean, I took you guys know that I kind of took a short break from Harry Potter fan fiction for a couple of years, and before that break, prior to that break, he was like not even on my radar a tiny bit. Like it was just like, oh, Sirius Black, whatever. And then I kind of just like, I don't know, maybe I saw something on Tumblr talking about how he's super cool or something, and I just kind of got pitched head first into this whole like Marauders obsession, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll roll with it. So
Right on.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I know has rather resonated with a lot of people who've read the story is that you go into a lot of the vulnerability that doesn't get explored a lot with Sirius. Can you talk to us about that vulnerability?
Sure. I mean, I think like it honestly, it almost is like it's there. I think if you, depending how you're approaching the Harry Potter books, like if you're kind of a person who likes to like read between the lines, it's kind of there. I think especially in the 5th book, you don't really see it as much in the other books because it's mostly a lot of craziness going on, especially Prisoner of Azkaban. Obviously, like they think he's a murderer up until the last second, and they're not really like, oh, this vulnerable man, like this poor guy. But in the 5th book, in Order of the Phoenix, I mean, you can see that he's and I wrote a story about this that I think you both have read, like he's in this house where he grew up. He very obviously did not have a good relationship with his family. And you do see a couple of moments where it's like they talk about how he's kind of like been drinking. They talk about him being very like frustrated and very upset with like not being able to leave the house. So I feel like I kind of filled in a lot of the blanks, I guess I would say. And it was like, well, obviously he didn't have like a happy adolescence, and like he was burned off his family tree. So like there's something to explore here for sure.
So in Edges, you recently did a switch on us and started to write about Remus Lupin instead of Sirius. Why did you decide to write about Remus for that story, and what about his character is so intriguing for you?
I'm gonna be like completely honest here and say that whenever I'm like not actually writing about Sirius, I'm usually still writing about Sirius. Like it's just kind of an excuse. And so for Edges, I it was honestly kind of like based on the song, because listening to the song, I really was thinking like, oh, this is how like Remus would see Sirius. Like song sounds like it's talking about Sirius through Remus's eyes. So it was really kind of that. It was less about me being like, oh, I really want to write Remus Lupin, and more about like wanting to look at Sirius externally, whereas Breathe obviously was very internal, like very quiet. There were a lot of chapters where he doesn't even talk to anybody. So I would say that, but also Remus is a really cool character for sure. I mean, he's very much portrayed as this like gentle guy, kind of a quiet guy, but still snarky and like still mischievous. But then, you know, he's a werewolf, and he obviously struggles with that, like very much. It leads to so many problems in his life, like, and I think that as I kind of explored in Edges, he would really like wrestle with it in terms of like morality and self-esteem. But yeah, it is a little bit of a sneaky thing. Even my other story, which is not nominated, Keeping Vigil, which I think you've both read again, it's about James and Lily, but I just wrote it because I thought of a scenario involving a Sirius. And I was just like, oh, I can turn it into a whole story. Like, it's really bad. I have a problem.
Well, you also recently returned to the world of submitting fics out there, and I haven't had a chance to read it. But what can you tell us about your new work?
I hope it will surprise people. I think it surprised Caitlin. I know she validated it. Thank you, Caitlin. and she messaged me on Skype. I don't remember exactly what she said. Something along the lines of, "How dare you?" So I really wanted to surprise people with it because it is for the Death Denial Challenge that Caitlin hosted like forever ago. I obviously did not finish on time for it to be considered. But I remember like thinking, oh, I'm going to sign up with Sirius, obviously. And then kind of going like, you know what, everyone is expecting me to do that. And for good reason, but everyone is expecting me to do that. So I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And I signed up with James because I was like, that just seems like really easy to fix. Basically, like his death always is like comes across as so unnecessary. Whereas like Lily, obviously her death had the whole like domino effect of Harry like becoming a Horcrux and blah blah blah. Like James just kind of died, and so it was like that seems super easy to undo. And I remember signing up and Caitlin like saying like, "What? Are you sure?" like I think she actually wrote on the list. She had a list going of like so and so signed up with so and so, and she wrote like Kayla, Sirius Black, and had it crossed out and replaced with James Potter. I remember that. Like I just wanted to surprise people, so I really hope I managed to do that.
Well, having been one of the few people that have read it so far, having validated it just a few hours back, it's really, really good. So for those of you watching, like, I highly recommend going and reading it. It's definitely surprising. It's also a huge gut punch, so probably prepare a tub of ice cream before you get started.
Yeah, go check it out. I'm not even ashamed. I'm gonna beg.
You shouldn't have to. It's seriously excellent. One of my favorite pieces of yours so far, in fact. So I'd really, really, everything you read is excellent, but that was really good. The surprising elements were really well written, and surprisingly, Sirius actually shows up in it too. So, but yeah, so go check it out, read it, review it.
All right. Well, we want to give you a big thank you again, Kayla, for coming on and talking to us about all your writing that has been nominated and your writing that you're doing now, which sounds pretty exciting. I feel like I'm gonna have to log off once the awards are over and go read this now, because I've always loved James Potter. I know, shocker of the century for me too, as a character. So him not dying would, it seems like something I've definitely at least got to give a shot.
Yeah, it's all very exciting. And I promise he does not die. He does not die.
Okay, all right.
I fulfilled the challenge requirements. He makes it through all the way to the end.
Well, what we're gonna do now, and feel free to stay on here if you want to, Kayla too. We are going to jump to the time has come for the announcement of all of the award winners.
Ooh, okay, I'm gonna duck out and just watch.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay.
Thanks, Kayla.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Bye.
And so, just by way of a little bit of background on the awards, we've talked about them a little bit generally and how they got started, what they are. But this year is the inaugural edition, like we've said, and we actually have 17 categories. We decided this year to kind of make it a little bit more open than it has been in the past in terms of the breadth and range of things that would be considered, as well as in terms of voting. Not really trying to narrow it down this time, just kind of trying to let everybody have their say of what their favorite story was in each category, and then letting it all go to voting and let voting sort it out. And one of the things that was interesting about that is out of those 17, we actually ended up with 6 that we had to come back and do tie breaks on, because either so many people had a story that they really loved or a couple stories that they really loved, in bigger categories where we let people vote for a couple stories instead of just one, which was also a change. But also there was just some categories that were even rather small to begin with. People were just so excited about a couple of stories in those categories that we ended up having to come back and do a runoff where essentially those stories were fighting over a couple of votes that people had given to other stories in the category, which was I think pretty cool to see, and hopefully it'll be a good cool platform for us going forward. I think I have had the honors of being the first to announce. I'm going to be drawing from, and yes, I realized after the fact that all of this is going to appear backwards to all of you, but I will be drawing from the Winvelope for the 2017 Pogs. And our first category that we are going to go into is Best Angst. Angst for me, I'll say sort of by way of background, is always a really interesting category because so many people think of it, I think outside the fiction community in particular, they think of it as, it's got to be teenage, like kind of people feeling like emo kids or something like that. But it's actually got a lot more depth and complexity, where stories that have a whole lot of trial and difficulty for characters that could certainly be classified as angst end up also not with the sort of stereotypical sort of stewing in it ending, but an ending where they actually come through that as a better person or a better pairing, and I think the diversity of what angst can be was reflected in the number and diversity of nominees that we had. So this year for Best Angst, we actually had 7 nominees, by Sharn, aka Not Theodore Clipped Wings, by Kayla, aka Pop Punk Padfoot, who is just with us, Edges, one of the stories that we just talked about, by myself, Schrodinger's Cat and Shattered Glass, and by Caitlin, my wonderful co-host, Bunny Slippers and Fracture, and then by one of our housemates and former Gryffindor staffers, Gina, aka Unwritten Curse. We had Constellations, and the winner for Best Angst, no mirror image, was Clipped Wings by Sharn. So congratulations, Sharn, if you're out there still awake at this ungodly hour over there in the UK. hopefully you stayed up at least to celebrate this victory. We'll see. We'll find out tomorrow how tired you're sounding on Twitter. But I'll sort of kick it over to Caitlin, since I've rambled on a little bit. What were your thoughts about Clipped Wings when you read
So
it?
Clipped Wings is one of my absolute favorite stories across the board, but definitely some of Sharn's most spectacular prose. She's just a gorgeous writer, you know, in anything that she does, but I think it really stands out in Clipped Wings in the way that she explores Hepzibah's character and how she writes about something so tragic, but so makes it so beautiful at the same time. I just was really struck by it. I've been lobbying for it for pretty much every award for the last 2 years. It's absolutely one of my favorites, so I'm just thrilled to see her win.
Well, I definitely share your thoughts on the story. I thought, you know, Sharn always has this gift for saying so much and having this very descriptive, unique style, but not letting the prose like take over the story and take over the character, which I think is huge. And one of the things that I liked about it too was the way that some of these sort of, I mean, more rooted in the wizarding culture that she'd established as well, and kind of pureblood culture at the time, but also parallels to modern society and the sort of treatment, the disparate treatment that different genders get for engaging in the same conduct, and how that double standard really takes what's about to be kind of this glorious shining moment for Hepzibah and her family, and turns what should be wonderful into this this really dark struggle that she has to go through.
Absolutely. And the thing that's great about it too is even though she's writing about a time past, it's just she makes it so relatable and tangible and easy to, you know, to grasp. I think it's just a really beautiful piece in that.
For sure, for sure. So I will kick it to you now for our next category, Caitlin.
My envelope is not quite as fancy as Kevin's, and it's probably going to be backwards too because I didn't even think about that. But here's my fancy little envelope.
and it's not backwards, so congratulations.
Oh, woohoo! All right. So I'm going to be doing Outstanding Archivist, and there is a lot of outstanding archivists in Gryffindor. There's so many nominations, and I can't remember them top of my head because there's so many. So you'll have to give me just a second. Let's see. We had Camp Angst, Chamomile, sorry, Melion, and myself. So Camp Angst is Dan, Chamomile is Amy, Melion, Mel, and then me. And all of the people listed have put just a huge body of work forward. Dan and Mel have some of the most entire site, and Amy was one of the first people to flood the site with stories. I remember the first week almost I validated pretty much exclusively her stories, and I have somewhere like 40 stories posted so far, so definitely some good nominations there. So the person that wins this award is Dan, aka Cam Angst. And Dan has just a huge reservoir of stories. He's got some fantastic novels. Detox is one of the first ones that comes to my mind. He writes a really, really incredibly diverse list of characters. I just this afternoon read a story of his about Hagrid and getting some redemption post-war, getting his name cleared and everything. And it's just amazing to see the breadth of stories that he can write. He does humor well, he does darkness well, he does angst well. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that there's really nothing he can't do. So a very well-deserved award for him.
Absolutely, and I think it's telling too. Not only the volume of stories that he's uploaded, but like you were saying, the quality of work that he's uploaded and continues to write. And it's certainly not going to be the last time that we hear that username on a nominees list, particularly in some of the story categories, which I think really speaks to that quality that you're talking about. I know one of the things that I've enjoyed most about Dan's writing is that he's one of those writers who always describes well, and has the versatility that Caitlin mentioned, but also always kind of connects with me anyway on this very sort of raw, visceral level about what he's writing about, and really makes it real with whatever he's writing about, to the point where you're really truly immersed in whatever story he's writing, really truly connected with whatever character he's writing about in the moment.
Absolutely. Like I said, everything that I've read from him has been excellent and relatable. And like you said, there's definitely that like raw poignancy. I think I've noticed that almost everyone seems to feel that way about his writing, which is quite a task when you consider the demographics of who's reading his story. But yeah, everything's just so relatable. That's one of the things particularly like I love about Detox, is just this raw greediness that like really connects with me deeply personally. So I thought this was definitely a very well-deserved one.
Absolutely. So I will take us to our next category, which is most welcoming. And of course, there are a lot of wonderful, welcoming, incredibly friendly souls in Gryffindor House. The nominees this time around were Amy, Camoyle, Mel, Melion, Minnie, Professor McGonagall, myself, but bizarrely enough, and Caitlin. And as I was going through, seeing who is going to prevail in this category, it resonated with me. It sort of reminded me of the scene in The Office where they, not the circumstances, but the phrase that ends up on Jim's cake when they implement an employee of the month. It could only be you. And so it should come as no surprise to anyone that the winner of the Most Welcoming Griffey Award for the inaugural POGs is none other than my co-host, Caitlin, who reaches out to everybody via their wall, via PM, and she's always contributing whenever anybody has questions about things that are going on in the archive, or she's a validator in particular. Always so proactive in hosting challenges and events and making sure that cool things and even just discussion are going on in the CR. So no surprise to me. I'm sure no surprise to anyone that Caitlin would come out on top, even in a strong field of nominees.
It's a big surprise to me. I mean, considering everybody that's there, honestly, I don't really feel like I deserve it. I think there's a lot of people that are very, very friendly and welcoming, but I'm really like honored and humbled that everybody feels that way. So thank you very much for this. So I have the luxury of doing the next category, which is our non-HP related category. So we wanted to take a chance to recognize some of our beloved Griffies who are writing stories outside of their Harry Potter world. At the time of the awards, there wasn't a whole ton of them, but we are seeing more and more uploading, and we want to definitely encourage that. That being said, we do have some Gryffindors who have written some really cool pieces, so we wanted to take a moment to recognize them. There was 2 nominations for this category. The first was Waiting for the Light, which is a fic about Andromeda, 17 farm girl, or Jill. And then the second one was Brothers Rich, and it was a numbers fanfic written by Alicia or Lady Asphodel. Both of them are really great quality stories. Brother Rich is a nice little one-shot, just a short snippet of the world, and Andromeda is an epic novel that's still in progress. Both definitely worth the read if you have some time. So the winner of this is Waiting for the Light by Jill, 1917 farm girl. I've read bits and pieces of this story as Jill has been writing them. I've done a little bit of beta work for her at certain points, and I haven't had a chance to sit down and read the whole thing yet because it's a good, I think, 60 chapters at this point. But the pieces I have read are incredibly compelling. I'm not familiar with Andromeda at all, and I still follow along well with it and was incredibly engrossed with the pieces that I've gotten to see. If you've ever read any of Jill's work, you already know what a quality writer she is. So delving into the story, I think, is definitely a worthwhile project for anyone that might be interested.
And I have also had the good fortune of talking to Jill a lot about this story. I've not had the honor of betaing it, but I've talked to Jill a lot about the story and read the beginning of the story before voting in this year's awards. And the thing that always sticks out, I think, when I'm reading any kind of fan fiction anyway, is can they make the characters engaging and identifiable, sort of no matter your level of familiarity with the fandom. And I think that's something that Jill does so well in all of her works, this one included. Just really, even for someone who has never in their life watched an episode of the series, only been treated and greeted to amusing gifs by Jill or others trolling Jill in conversation. I think she really, as she always does, gets you to engage with those characters and the struggle that they're in.
Definitely, and her character definitely does struggle. In the bits and pieces I've read, there is lots of good angsty bits in there. So if you're a fan of angst, definitely check this one out.
And our next category is Best Pairing, which we just decided to call it Best Pairing. Shippers out there may prefer that it be called Best Ship. But Best Pairing had a handful of nominations this time around. We had, and one of the things that was interesting about it was that obviously there are so many ships and pairings that are incredibly popular within the Harry Potter fandom. You know, it's almost if there's a pairing you want to read, no matter how crazy it may be, there's not just one, but there's a handful at least of stories out there for it. And I think that diversity was sort of reflected in the fact that none of them were the same. We had a couple of canon pairings. We had a couple of non-canon pairings, or at least not known to be canon in one of those cases. And we also had one that included an original character that the author had just created themselves in the pairing, which is always a challenge when you're in an era that's like this one was, that's affected by canon at the very least, even if it's not as well defined as, you know, writing in the straight up Second Wizarding War, Between Wars, Hogwarts era kind of stuff. But our list of nominees were from the other Kevin in Gryffindor, Bardic Magic, Ginny Weasley and Harry Potter in Chasing Life, Seeking Love, Keeping Hope, Sirius Black and that original character I was talking about, Laura, in How to Tame a Marauder by Melion, Remus Lupin and Sirius Black in Edges by Pop Punk Padfoot, and Nymphadora Tonks and Remus Lupin in First Kiss by Unwritten Curse. And the winner this year was none other than one of the most famous pairings in fic, I think, really at this point, Sirius Laura in How to Tame a Marauder. So congrats, Mel.
I had the luxury of validating probably at least half of this story on our archives, and it's just incredible. I'm so particular about OCs, and Mel really just did a beautiful job of creating Laura and really making you root for her and root for her relationship with Sirius. It's definitely across the board one of those fics that I feel like if you're really into fic, you have to have read at some point.
Well, I have to finish reading it. I've read the beginning of it believe it or not the whole thing. I know, terrible. But I read the beginning of this one as well before voting, and one of the things that jumped out to me about Laura, the OC side of this pairing, is how much care
Kevin,
Mel took.
You're freezing.
Uh-oh. Am I still here?
Yep, I can see you now.
Okay, excellent. So one of the things that really took me in early on in the story, which is the part that I've read, is the care that Mel took to make this character not fall into sort of the tropes that serious pairings seem to fall in. There are so many different interpretations of pairing him with canon characters, but I think there are a lot of people who pair Sirius with an original character, and it's somebody who's Sirius is a playboy and is just the most attractive girl at Hogwarts, or it's Sirius is out there for a good time, and whoever he's paired with just wants to have a good time too. Is very sort of non-committal and not maybe the brightest. Or on the other side of things, people will put Sirius with this person who is just so so incredibly snarky. You wonder how even someone as snarky as Sirius could stay with him. But I think Mel really got the balance down of having someone who's complicated and has opinions of her own, that she's not going to give up her identity, as so many sort of tropey OCs do when they're put in a relationship with Sirius. But she particularly keeps herself and her struggles as a very real part of who she is, independent of this shit that's created in the story.
I definitely agree with that. And Mel also does a good job of not turning Sirius into a stereotype, because like you said, there's so often with that character him as that snarky leather pants bad boy character. So it's kind of refreshing to see Mel take a whole different twist on it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So our next award is going to be the best between the wars. So I've got my little envelope here, and there was 2 stories nominated for that. Charlie Weasley and His Dragons by Starfeather, and my story Spectrum. Charlie Weasley and His Dragons is about Charlie, obviously, and then I wrote about Nymphadora Talks. So the winner is and His Dragons by Starfeather. Kenny does such a good job of exploring and really kind of making them unique and his own, creating his own version and his own world, and really making them believable. He's explored Charlie in a couple other stories as well, so it's great to see him kind of continue along in that dimension. Any thoughts, Kevin?
Yeah, I think my favorite part of this story of Kenny's is, and I have not read a lot of his other Charlie Weasley stories, but my favorite part of this story was really the way that he takes the care to write the story and give Charlie a background of why he is who he is. Because it's kind of like we were talking about with Sirius and the OCs, with the last category. I think there's this tendency in fic to sort of erase Charlie Weasley and not really address him, or there's this tendency to just be like, oh, he's the cool dude, out there in Romania, like hanging out with dragons, without the why behind it that Kenny tries to give us. And so that was the thing I think I appreciated most about this story. And I thought Kenny did a great job laying out the reasons why, and sort of the nuts and bolts of what it is to be Charlie Weasley, rather than just this idea of Charlie out there, doing whatever vagueness it is that he does with dragons.
Definitely. I think you'll see that throughout Kenny's writing, that he really takes care in developing his characters. A lot of the times, he mixes his culture in with with his stories, and I think it really adds a cool understanding and a uniqueness to his writing that I feel is very like connected to him. I almost always can tell with his stories because of how you, like you said, he goes really into detail, into depth in creating that whole character. So.
Our next category is the best first Wizarding War story, which is, it featured 4 nominees. One was by Amy, Always Her, Not Fade Away, by Kath, aka Slide. My still ridiculously unfinished James Lilly novel Evolution, and Constellations by Gina, Unwritten Curse. And the winner was, in what I think was a very strong category aside from mine, Constellations, by Gina, which I had the privilege of reading actually for one of the rounds of the Knockout Challenge that I hosted back on the HPFF forums. Constellations was a story that I really, really enjoyed reading. I think there were a number of rounds, obviously, in the Knockout Challenge, because that's what it was, a sort of a bracket style. Where people would have to write different things, and then it would move on from there or not. And this was a round 2 entry where she'd already moved on once. And it did a lot of things that were very cool. It explored a ship that is just not explored very often, talking about Andromeda Black and Ted Tonks. And then she also used a really cool device in writing, structurally called a triptych, and segmented the story that way around the song that was the inspiration for the story, as per the prompt, which was Devil Town. If you're familiar with Friday Night Lights, or just have listened to the original hit by Bright Eyes, then you'll know a lot about that song. And this story really, what's cool about it to me is in tackling this sort of rarely tackled pairing, Gina doesn't do what a lot of people do with quote unquote rare pairs, in sort of trying to do too much too quickly with the pairing, or making it kind of over dramatic and really hitting like huge high notes necessarily. She really makes it about Andromeda's life, and even the pairing is not, it's not so straightforward. It's not all just hunky-dory sunshine and rainbows, as you would expect it would not be in this relationship. And so she resisted that urge and really created something, particularly in the scene where Andromeda and Ted are talking to one another in the library, where really he forces Andromeda to really confront who she is, and gives us an idea of how that helped her make a decision about who she was going to be, which is such a strong character going forward in the series that I think doesn't get a lot of the praise that a lot of the other strong older female characters like Molly Weasley get in some circles. But this story really called to mind the struggles that she went through, and shows kind of how she would become the person that she does become, which is an incredibly strong person that I think gets overlooked a lot. Her strength, despite her connection to one of the most beloved characters in the series, I think, Nymphadora Tonks.
Definitely. Interestingly enough for me, I don't for whatever reason, relate very well to Andromeda. She's not a character that I tend to read a ton, but something that really stood out to me about Gina's work is just how much it sucked me in, and how much I really enjoyed reading it, and how she made Andromeda a character that I could respect more and like more and understand more, I guess. Gina's just a fantastic writer across the board as well. I mean, if you've read any of her other works, you already know, she's just a beautiful writer, and this is just one more story in a long list of incredible works. So the next category we're going to be doing is the best reviewer. So this is obviously not about writing. It's going to be more about who puts a lot of effort into leaving the reviews that us authors really like to receive. Nominated were Lizzie, aka Looney Lizzie, Sharn, aka Not Theodore, Kenny, aka Starfeather, my wonderful co-host Kevin, and myself. So the winner is going to be Sharn, aka Not Theodore. So Sharn is one of those lovely people that leaves a story in a review. It's always a joy to get reviews from her, because literally her reviews end up longer than essays that I've written for college. She goes into so much depth, so much detail, and she leaves you feeling so positive about the story. And the thing that's great about it is that she finds ways to give you constructive feedback without dragging you down or making you feel like you should quit. She always makes you feel good about your story. And one thing that I notice in particular is that she always picks out these little things that I hide in my stories that I'm like, I wonder if anyone will notice this. She always, always, always catches them. So I know personally it's a great joy for me to receive reviews from her, and I think a lot of people feel similarly.
I know I definitely share that sentiment. I think Sharn was one of the first people to actually review my stuff back when we first met. And that was at a time where I had not written anything sort of creative fiction-y in about 8-10 years. And to be perfectly honest, it was not that great. It's undergoing edits now. But like Caitlin was saying, I think she really found the things that were good about it. It would have been easy to say, this needs to be a lot longer. It needs to be bulked up with some description or add some dialogue in here. And it would have been easy to hit all those things, but instead, she really focused on some of the threads that I hoped people would pick up on that would be something going forward. And certainly in those cases, the review, I think, was longer than the chapter. But another thing that's amazing about Sharn is the way that she gets all those details and gives all this helpful, very positive, constructive feedback, and how frequently she has been able to do it. Even now when she's working, she still takes time to leave people plenty of the same level of quality detailed reviews. And I know she's left at this point, I think, thousands of reviews probably over the time that she's been involved with our community. And it's just each and every one of them, you would never get any idea that she was not reading the story incredibly carefully, giving her all to getting the best feedback that she possibly can. So I think incredibly deserving winner for best reviewer.
Absolutely.
The next category was best second Wizarding War story, and the nominees in that category were Marked by Dan, aka Cam Angst, Entwined, which was an entry that was written for challenge for the HPFT archive by Alicia, aka Lady Asphodel, Will-o'-the-Wisp by Lowe, aka Marauder Times, and A Promise to Dead Man, also one of those grand opening entries by Melion. And the winner was Marked by Cam Angst. And like I said, don't be surprised if you heard Dan's name again when we're talking about him as archivist. This was one of these incredible stories where you often get people who try to write sort of the other side of canon and get mixed results. But this was a story that really addressed the complexity of Draco Malfoy as a character and what faced him after he was given the task to kill Dumbledore in HBP, and how he wrestled with that, and how it changed sort of who he was and how he saw what he had been so excited initially to become a part of, and then realized sort of what he really had gotten himself into later. And you know, the stuff that we mentioned about Dan's writing earlier, I think definitely holds true for this piece. I am personally not and never will be a Draco Malfoy apologist. Just don't have a whole lot of pity for him, given his age at the time and the extent of what he does. I think he's old enough to know at least the boundaries of what he's getting into, even if he wants to be naive about some of the depth of it. But nevertheless, Dan found a way to make his sort of personal war with that and his realization of how naive he had been.
Definitely. Dan's so good about really dragging out the complexity of characters. Draco is one that he explores in great depth throughout his AP. And I think Marked is just a great example, like you said, of finding a way to, like, still make you hate Draco and feel disgusted with him, but feel sympathy. And it's just this confusing mix of emotion by the time that you're done. You don't really know where you stand. Even the most diehard Draco hater, can really find something tangible and understandable in there. And that's just another testament of what a fantastic writer Dan is. So our next category is going to be Best Minor Character. And we have Hepzibah Smith by Sharn in Clipped Wings. We have Dorcas Meadows by Pix in Flatline. And we have Newt Scamander in A Man Named Newt Scamander by Pix as well. Our winner is going to be Hepzibah Smith, Clipped Wings by Not Theodore. Just like you said with Dan, Sharn's name is going to be one that pops up a lot. She's obviously an excellent writer. I can say about this story because I already said so much in the beginning, but I've been lobbying for this story for so long. Like, I could be a paid professional lobbyist for this one. I followed this chapter by chapter as she wrote it and left reviews, like, begging her to write more every time she posted. I think that the way that she delves into Hepzibah and makes her just this character who you feel so much sympathy for is incredible. I was biting nails the whole way through. There was parts where I knew where things were going, and the other parts that caught me completely by surprise. But regardless, Hepzibah just was such a compelling character for me throughout this story.
Well, one of the things that also is incredible to me about the way that she developed this character in this story is the structure that she used in the story. This is not as deep and complex as it is, and as wonderfully written as it is. It's not a story that you might sit here thinking about us if you have not read it, saying, God, they're probably talking about this just like mountainous novel or something to that effect. Not at all. It's a very quick, I won't say an easy read because of what it deals with, and the impact that it has on I think just about anybody who would read it. if you're a human. But the chapters are quick takes that everything in them is so important. And everything in them gives you this insight into who Hepzibah is and kind of how she becomes who she becomes when she started off in a very different place than where she ends up. But just an incredible story, an incredible character that drives that story.
Definitely.
The next category that we have is the best original character. And there were 4 nominees. One was Sadie McLaughlin from Jill, aka 1917 Farm Girls, Gravel on the Ground from the Ashes. Then Lizzie's Lady Mondegreen, who was the titular character of that story. And another couple from Pix who we heard from earlier, Zet in Harry Potter and the New Centennials, and Ren Longbottom, who we got a chance to get a whole lot of insight into from Pix earlier in her novel Rabbit Heart. And the winner in a runoff, this was one of the tiebreaker categories, it was Ren Longbottom from Rabbit Heart by Pix. And obviously, I don't necessarily want to belabor. We've talked a lot about Ren with Pix and about how she came to be. But I think a lot of what Pix said, obviously, about her own character was exactly what I found incredible about Ren. Because she sort of was this person who had an enormous amount of responsibilities. You got the sense was not really sure where she fit in her family and her larger kind of extended social structure or at Hogwarts, and was even reticent really to connect with people who made a real effort to connect with her. But Pix still made her so relatable and identifiable. I think with people who have found themselves in this, not just people who found themselves in a similar situation, but even with people who've not necessarily had that struggle, but have sort of thought about why people that they interact with are the way they are. And Pix did a great job with Ren of showing us, I think, showing everybody who read the story that things and people are not always, as they appear to be. They can come across as cold or aloof or, disengaged. And maybe that's not really the way that they want to be for various reasons. But I thought Ren, a very deserving winner and an incredible list of characters. And not surprising at all to see multiple of Pix's characters nominated in this category, because she is so creative and has such a gift, like the other nominees as well do, for creating something that's her own and for generating exceptional characterizations.
And Vampire, but
Yes.
I don't know how much I can add to that. Honestly, I think Kevin hit the nail on everything. Pix is a phenomenal writer. I actually nominated her other story for her character Zed, because she's just so great at bringing characters to life. Like Kevin said, Ren is so relatable. Reading this, going, hey, how did she know my life story in here? There's lots of little bits and pieces that it seems like she pulls from people's life experience. And that's really what brings her characters to life. So great job, Pix. All right, so our next award is going to be Best Team Spirit. There was a lot of nominees in this category, and deservingly so. There's so many enthusiastic members of Gryffindor, it's really hard to choose. So we have K.O. Moyle, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, Amy. Lo, Marauder Times, Melion, Minnie, Professor McGonagall, and then Kenny, Starfeather, again, Kevin, how can he not be nominated? And myself. So many, like I said, so many great nominees. I feel like every single person nominated should win this award because everyone here does a fantastic part of keeping up morale and cheering each other on. And that's one of the things I really love about our house is just how much enthusiasm there is and how much compassion and care for each other there is. So the winner. Oh, well, this one's interesting. I think we might have made a mistake, Kevin. I think you might have supposed to have got this award. This is awkward.
Oh my goodness. This is.
I don't know how this.
We've had no technical difficulties, but apparently when dividing up the categories.
I don't know how that one slipped by me while I was writing the card. Jeez. So I won the best team spirit. I'm not really sure why, but I appreciate it nonetheless. I think there's infinitely more encouraging and friendly people than me, but I'm glad that the little bit that I do makes people feel welcome and like I'm cheering them on. So I'll just hide behind this envelope now.
And Caitlin, as usual, her modesty is too much, because if there's somebody in Gryffindor House who is driving people to be active and doing more to make sure that there's a lot of camaraderie and friendship in the house, I don't know who it is. So congratulations, Caitlin. And congratulations on getting to read your own victory there.
That wasn't awkward at all.
Well, I will go ahead and take us away from that and into the next category, which was the best post-war story. This was one of the categories that just had a huge amount of nominees and a hugely exceptional amount of nominees. Some of these stories are stories that they were nominated in other categories, maybe did not necessarily make a tie break, but we had to have a three-way tie break in this category from the 8 nominees that came in on it. The first was Jill's story, 1917 Farm Girl Healing. Detox by Cam Angst or Dan, which is one of the stories that Caitlin's already mentioned as one of her favorites by Dan. The Last Snowy Feather by Alicia, which was about the loss of Hedwig. Circles by Sharn, not Theodore. Rabbit Heart, which we've talked a lot about, by Pix. My story, which I don't really know how it's even in the reckoning or ever was with these other stories. Calculus. In 2 of Caitlin's stories, Incandescence and The Next Great Adventure. This The Next Great Adventure by Caitlin. And I can say the Next Great Adventure is such an interesting story to me because it reunites Harry and Dobby in addressing the afterlife. And I think it's easy for people to address the afterlife as this wonderful, great place for Harry where he just gets everything that he didn't have growing up. It's fluff. He meets his parents again, and it's sort of quote unquote in the flesh, and everything's wonderful and perfect. He's the last to go, and he gets reunited with everybody he's loved and who's loved him and supported him, and it's just let's all have a big group hug. Caitlin makes it a little bit more difficult than that, as Dobby kind of tries as best he can within the confines of some rules to get Harry to where he's sort of, I don't want to say supposed to be, but where he may end up in the afterlife. And with this being one of your stories, I would obviously be remiss not giving you the opportunity, Caitlin, to kind of tell us a little bit about where it came from and what makes it special to you.
Well, I've read quite a few stories about the afterlife, and like you said, a lot of the times it's more, you know, Harry moving on and finally getting some peace, which is great because, you know, I think all of us are rooting for Harry to get some peace finally after the hellacious life he's had. Unfortunately, I have a sadistic streak, and so I decided to put him through hell, basically. Again, I'm personally not like a super religious person, and so my concept of the afterlife isn't necessarily like a black and white heaven hell sort of a idea. I kind of like to think that the afterlife starts over and you get judged, you know, on a scale of what you've accomplished in your previous life, but also on whether you're worthy or not to continue on, basically, in this story. And so, you know, it starts with Harry dying as an old man and then reuniting with Dobby, like you said. And I've just been trying to explore what Harry might face as tests and as challenges, and the different, it's an ensemble cast. I tried to explore a lot of the different characters within the Harry Potter realm within the story. So it's just exploring, I guess, what happens to everybody when they die.
Well, it is very unique and very well done.
Thank you. I'm like totally flailing around right now inside. I'm trying not to on the camera, but like this is my baby, so I'm really, really excited about this one. So we're going to go into Best Major Character, which is one of my favorite categories. I love seeing what people can do with canon. So Best Major Character. Oh, nominations first. Let's see. Character. Here we go. So we have 2 nominations from Kayla, aka Pop Punk Padfoot, who you guys spoke with earlier. The first one is Breathe, which features Sirius Black, and the next one is Edges, which features Remus Lupin. And our third nomination is Our July, which features Hermione Granger and is written by Gina, or Unwritten Curse. So our winner is Remus Lupin in Edges by Pop Punk Padfoot, or Kayla, as she's known to us. This is one of my favorite pieces. I say this, I feel like I'm like a broken record here, but it's just because there's so many good stories that have been nominated. Edges is just a beautiful quality story. It really explores how conflicted Remus is as a character. It explores the darkness that's in him and his insecurities about being a werewolf, and his love for Sirius, and just it's just a beautiful, breathtaking story. I think I read parts of it before Kayla posted it, and then read the whole thing straight through it after she had posted it. And it just, I had to read it about 3 times to really like let it all sink in. It's just encapsulates his character so perfectly. It's everything I've ever thought about him. I think it, while it pulls in the Wolf Starfic, which is, you know, depending on what side of that debate you're on, could be canon, could not be canon. But I think it follows canon well and really is just a beautiful piece of writing.
And I actually wound up reading this quite a while after it was published. I was looking for more of Kayla's work after reading Breathe. And when I read this story, I think what just leapt out to me most of all was the way that she was able to use description so effectively in the story. A lot of what works in this story, I think, is the sort of subtext that's there. Both Remus thinking about himself and obviously in relation to Sirius as well. Has this great way of dealing with simpler things that, well, I say simpler, I really mean, I guess, more minute, because they're very much not simple to deal with and capture well without being distracting. But Kayla does with things like facial expressions and mannerisms. and weaving those into the conversation seamlessly, but also to help people kind of read between the lines. And then also weaving in the people with the setting so well, and connecting those with emotions story at that given time, that really makes it so the people and the places and the plot of what's going on are really sort of inseparable, which I think adds so much to Remus's character in the story. And I think that's a huge reason why there are 3 nominees, but 3 incredible nominees. And I think that's the stuff that makes Remus and Edges rise to the top.
Definitely. And I just got a live tweet from Kayla to say that she's blushing right now. So I'm just going to make her blush a little bit more. I think one of the other things that's really fantastic about this story is the way that Kayla uses descriptive prose. Some of her other writing, like Breathe, it's a little bit more straightforward and direct. But in Edges, she just nails the prose and the feeling. And it's just a really, really deep, gut-wrenching, hopeful, sweet, all sorts of mixes of emotions sort of a piece. Really, really, if you haven't read it, absolutely should.
Definitely go read Edges if you have not. The next category, as we start to wind our awards to close, is one of the most interesting categories for me, the best one shot. And one of the reasons that I like this category so much anyway is because we talked about the sort of hidden range that Angst has. One shots have the unhidden range. They can really be absolutely anything. And whether they're 500 words or 5,000 words, diversity in the writing style and in the emotions, the characters, the setting, everything, that can make it so hard to pick one story that would stand out as the best. And I think that is part of the reason why we end up with 8 nominees in this category, and why our tiebreaker was definitely the biggest tiebreaker that we had to have in any category, because we actually got enough votes that 5 stories out of the 8 tied the first time around. So the original nominees were Jill's story, The Ungrateful Dead, Dan's The Price of Redemption, another one that we've heard before, Alicia's The Last Snowy Feather, Mel's The Night Everything Changed, Sharn's The Story of You, Kath, aka Slide, Toward the Heights, my story, Schrodinger's Cat, which somehow still hang around, and Caitlin's Your Obedient Servant. And out of multiple rounds of voting, very, very tough to end up selecting a winners by a margin of 1 vote over a couple of stories. The winner, and I think very much deservedly so, was Toward the Heights by Slide. Kath's story really paints Ron in this really interesting light that I think a lot of people don't paint him in, or are afraid to paint him in, as a much more integral, serious character going forward. I think a lot of people, when they write Ron after Deathly Hallows even, tend to have this idea that, oh, you know, Ron matured sort of in the moment, but when push comes to shove, you know, he's still like kind of the funny goofball, and he's even though he's been through so much, like that's sort of his default. This story painted him as he doesn't lose that humor that I think is a core part of who Ron is, for sure. But he comes across as a person dealing with real problems in the career that he's chosen as an Auror with Harry. And he's also not just dealing with real problems as an Auror, he's dealing with real problems that real people deal with, I think, on a regular basis with their life and the choices that they've made. Particularly with careers. People change careers probably more now than I think, before I go too far off into the weeds, but more now than I think they have in eras past. And a lot of this story is about Ron and whether he feels like being an Auror, fighting that fight, keeping on fighting the fight that he fought, honestly, for most of his childhood, alongside Harry, is really what he wants to do anymore. It's brought on by this situation where he ends up having to be part of a hearing for use of force on a suspect that he's involved in investigation of. But that's really just a prism through which we see who Ron really is and what's really most important to him going forward. And I think Kath's laying out of that investigation, the way the process works was incredible, and the way that she uses all of that to show us who Ron is and how he's struggling kind of with who he really is and his allegiance to Harry and his desire to be maybe someplace not necessarily not with Harry, but not working with Harry, doing what's still most important to Harry, affects him. And revealing how I think he thinks it is going to be a bigger problem than it ends up being, when he decides he wants to diverge from continuing on as an Auror, which surprises Harry. But I think Ron, throughout the story, has concerns that it's really gonna upset the apple cart way more than it ever actually ends up doing. Which is an interesting place to see Ron in relation to Harry too. I think in comparison to him, throughout most of canon, not really wanting to be necessarily the guy following, but that tension sort of lives on in the story. But as I conclude my ramblings, an absolutely exceptional story, and it's definitely another one of many that we've talked about tonight that you absolutely got to go out and read. It's a longer one shot, but you'll read it so much faster than you'd ever imagine if you just looked at the word count.
I definitely agree. I think, job burnout and all of the things that Kevin has already discussed are such relatable things. I'm kind of like hitting that career point in my life where it's like, oh, hey, do you want to, continue this way? And I found Ron really relatable in that area. I thought like, wow, this is like kind of where I'm at in my life. And I feel like this character is just really hitting the nail on the head, not just as Ron, who I feel like is such a hard character to write well, but also as a relatable person in general. But we already know that everything that Kath writes is beautiful too. I mean, how many times has she been nominated for awards and won awards at that? So just another to add to the wall of shiny things. Congratulations. So the next category is one that I'm super, super excited to get to announce. It's Best Artist. So this is where we take a break from writing and acknowledge the people that do beautiful graphic art in our house. So whether it's making banners, awards, chapter images, you name it, these are some of our core artists. And I just want to stress ahead of time that every single person in this category, except for myself, I don't know how I ended up there, but like all the other people are super, super, super talented. And this was like incredibly like a big nail biter for me. So without further ado, our nominees are where are they? Here we go. Our nominees are Amy, or Kaya Moyle, Alicia, or Lady Asphodel, and Kayla Pop Punkfoot, and then myself, although, like I said earlier, there's no reason I should be even in that list. So the award goes to Alicia, or Lady Asphodel. So I'm really, really excited to get to announce this one. Alicia is a dear friend of mine, and she is a brilliant artist. If you ever get a chance to look through her gallery, she has this, what I keep telling her is like a psychedelic style. She does this really brilliant technique where she'll take textures or stock, and she does this kind of a swirling thing. It's a really cool, unique, distinct thing that I've only ever really seen her do. She has this just very definitive style. I can always pick out her work before, I see the name attached to it. And aside from just being a fantastic artist, she's also a fantastic teacher in terms of teaching art as well. I have her to thank for my ability to make graphics at all. I know that she's helped others, countless hours of mentoring and encouraging. She's a mod on the graphics site. She just is so involved in the art community from top to bottom. And I'm just really, really happy that she's won this award.
And I can also attest to, I will give the layperson's perspective on my belief that Alicia is absolutely brilliant. Caitlin, as usual, is selling herself short. But ever since I've been involved with the community, Alicia has been one of the standout artists who creates just the most incredible things. And aside from teaching people how to create those things themselves or to try to, she's just always so giving of her time to create those things like banners and awards. It's one of those things where it's almost, if there's a graphic that really needs making for Gryffindor, like for these awards, Alicia never hesitates to step up and create something that's going to be just an enormous value to the people who are going to be receiving it. And everything that I've seen that she has created, she also takes such care to match it to what that person really wants and to work with them to figure out like whether what she's thinking they're wanting is really what they're wanting, and to go the extra mile to give them what they're really hoping for, rather than just kind of say, well, that back and forth, well, this sort of like is what it is. But a very deserving winner, an incredible human being, incredible artist. And we're so thankful to have Alicia as part of our house. And it's my deepest congratulations.
Absolutely. Like I said, definitely well deserved. And just to piggyback off of what you've already said too, in terms of detail, I talk to her a lot. We look over each other's graphics a lot while we're in the creative process. And I can't tell you how much time and attention she puts into literally every single creation she makes. It's an amazing process to watch. Really, really well deserved.
All right, and with that, we have reached our 17th category, which is Best Novel. We have not pulled the Oscar game, I promise, of leaving Best Novel, like Best Picture, to the bitter end. There's actually a separate, distinct reason that Best Novel was left to the bitter end. But here are the Best Novel. 17 Farm Girl, Gravel on the Ground from the Ashes. Another nomination for Dan, aka Cam Inks, Detox. Her Times, Making the Reserves. Melion, How to Tame a Marauder. Sharn, Not Theodore's Jigsaw. And Pix, in her novel Rabbit Heart. And so why did we leave this to the bitter end? The why behind that, I don't have a fancy index card. I can't draw one out of the envelope because when it came to best novel, nobody could decide between two which the absolute best one was. So we have co-winners of the Best Novel Award in the inaugural edition of the Pogs, shared by Sharn's Jigsaw, an incredible story involving intrepid Roxanne Weasley as a reporter early on in her career, sort of putting together the details behind a burgeoning mystery that sort of lands on her desk by happenstance. And then Rabbit Heart, which we've talked about at length earlier and with picks earlier tonight. So congratulations to both Sharn and Pix. Incredible work. I would find it just about impossible to separate their stories too, so it's no surprise to me that that in the end, this was the one thing that people got deadlocked on.
Absolutely. I personally was looking at that category just going, how do I pick? It's all my favorites like tied up into one bunch. And, you know, like you said, both of the two that won are incredible and incredible for different reasons, completely different styles, different type of stories. But they both just, it's like trying to pick, you know, if you prefer chocolate or strawberry, they're both amazing flavors. Like they're just, you know, it's so hard to pick. So I'm really happy with the two that have been picked.
All right. Well, everybody who's been with us, thank you for sticking out with us. This
Almost
long.
2 hours.
We've seen, I think, as many as 9 folks watching at various points, which is, I think, a high water mark for our channel, which is pretty cool. We're very excited to have kind of broken ground with the live stream of the awards announcements. Obviously, it didn't go off perfectly. We'll hope to have some more dynamism, some more engagement, maybe some catchy tunes or something when we come back to you sometime around this time next year. But we want to thank everybody for being with us. We will, as soon as we've got it, post the permalink to the video so that if you were not able to catch it now, you'll be able to watch it later. If you want to hear the winners of the awards, or if you just want to ignore us and listen to cool thoughts from Pix and Kale at the beginning. But I also want to give a huge thanks to my co-host Caitlin for making this a reality and making it not me boring everybody, just like droning on at them about the award winners.
Oh, thank you for including me, Kevin. It was a blast. And thank you to you two for putting this all together. You put an incredible amount of work into these awards, so I'm glad to see them come to fruition. And in terms of actual physical awards that you can post on your wall and a little pip to add to your banner, I'll be posting those later this evening in the common room. The awards are co-made. I made half, sorry about that, and then Alicia made the other half. And then I made a little pip that is a little lion, so you can stick that on your awards for your inaugural, or on your banners for your inaugural POG awards. Just if you want to modify it onto a banner, make a request in the giant eraser section at TDA. Great.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a great night.